Okay, back for the great debate on the Investigative Journal. And we're starting out from the premise, of course, that terrorism is contrived by the Bush administration. Muslims aren't our enemy. Al-Qaeda's not our enemy. And we're starting from that premise, and we're looking what the American people deserve. We're looking for the enemy within, which is destroying our country as we speak in many ways. We've talked about on this show, and other people on alternative media have talked about. So let's get right into it. My guests today are Michael Collins Piper, author, and Eric John Phelps, author, two authors who have defied the mainstream media with their controversial books, tackling tough subjects CNN keeps buried, while they deceive the public trust with secondary and sinister motives. Michael Collins Piper has written a book called Final Judgment, and he's also written The New Jerusalem. You know him also as a guest host, not a guest host, but as a host on RBN from 6 to 7 every day on this station. And I think my listeners would like to know first from both of you how you both started this search for the truth, the search to get at who are the enemies within. Michael Collins, why don't we start with you? How are you today?
Oh, how you doing today, Greg? Thanks for having me on the show. I've been looking forward to this. First of all, I've always been interested in politics since I was about, probably 7 or 8 years old. I actually started out being interested in the history of the Civil War, and from there it developed into a growing interest in U.S. political affairs in general. During the Vietnam War, as a child, I was very much against the war because I just was instinctively anti-war. And then I eventually saw the effect that the war had on my older brother, who was actually drafted and went to Vietnam. And it was he's dead today. He survived the Vietnam War, but he never completely recovered from the physical and...
No, I'm sorry to hear that.
Thank you. Psychological impact of the war. In any case... being very, very anti-war, I, of course, started studying U.S. foreign policy. And by the time I was about 16 years old, I had pretty much come to the conclusion that one of the real powder kegs for U.S. foreign policy was the Middle East. And that was precisely, I determined, because of all-out U.S. support for Israel. And there's no question but that there is all-out U.S. support for Israel, and... as a consequence of that, I believe we were a victim of the 9/11 terrorist attacks. Whoever is responsible for 9/11, it is a direct outgrowth of U.S. involvement in the Middle East, number one, involvement on behalf of Israel. And number two, of course, we have found ourselves embroiled in this war in Iraq, and now if the Zionists and their controlled politicians like George W. Bush have their way, we will get into a war against Iran. So, needless to say, as I've always said, I say it on my program all the time, I say it every time I'm interviewed anywhere, the one thing which is consistent about U.S. Middle East policy is the fact that it is based on lies, bullying, and double standards. And as a consequence of my interest in the Middle East, I obviously did a lot of reading on the topic, and I discovered back in the mid to late 1980s that there was one aspect of U.S. Middle East policy that was hardly explored at all in most published material on the subject, and that was the fact that John F. Kennedy was engaged in a secret behind-the-scenes war with Israel over Israel's drive to build nuclear weapons of mass destruction. And, of course, as we all know, nuclear weapons of mass destruction were at the center of the war against Iraq, and they're certainly at the center of the intended war by the Zionists and their bought-and-paid-for politicians in America. That is the subject of their drive for war against Iran. So as I began to explore, and I was always interested in the Kennedy assassination, being interested in politics, I suddenly began to see that in all the published works on the Kennedy assassination, there was never anything mentioned about JFK's war with Israel. And what is even more interesting, I think, and I'm sure the listeners of RBN will appreciate this, in all of the mass media in America, John F. Kennedy was always presented as a strong and dear friend of Israel, that they tell the old myth that John F. Kennedy was the first president to to really become a friend of Israel. They talk about how John F. Kennedy sent Israel weapons. What they don't mention, of course, is the fact that the reason why JFK sent Israel conventional weapons was because Israel was blackmailing him and saying, you know, if you don't send us conventional weapons, we're going to build nuclear weapons. But, of course, they intended to do it anyway. Well,
Michael, if I could, just to give Eric fair time, you know how the breaks work. We got this about gives it even time. Then after the other break, we got about 4 minutes. So you'll each get 2 more minutes after that to explain yourself and how you got involved in looking at the truth. So I'm going to turn this over to my next guest, Eric John Phelps, author of Vatican's Assassins. And I think, like I said with Michael, I think our listeners would like to know, Eric, how you first got involved in seeking the truth and finding the real enemies within. How are you?
Very good, thank you. I was first stimulated to this topic when I was 10, when Kennedy was assassinated. I was in the 4th grade. I remember the day very vividly, and that had a lasting effect on me. The second issue was when I was in Bible college, I was exposed to the Jesuit hand in the assassination of Lincoln. I had a professor, Dr. Rember Carter, who had a whole class on. He was an Edinburgh graduate, has a PhD in history, and I was quite shocked. So then I began to check that out at length. And then the final issue was the issue of the Reformation Bible. The King James Bible was being supplanted by all these other versions, which I at the time did not know that there was a completely different Greek text underlying all these new versions, specifically the NIV, NASB, and others. So it was those 3 issues that really stimulated me to go back and study the Kennedy assassination and the authors that I began to trust the most, being Jim Marrs, Mark Lane, Fletcher Prouty, and a couple of others.
Okay. Would you like to continue, or is that all you'd like to say about your beginnings?
Sure. That's pretty much about the beginnings.
Okay. Well, listen, that was quick. Why don't we get to this next question? I want to ask both of you this, and we can start off with Michael. Historically, Michael, how have the Zionists come to power, and what has your research found?
Well, when you consider Zionist power in America, and I'd like to focus on that because, we should define the term Zionist first of all.
That's fine. Go ahead.
There are some people who use the term Jewish and the term Zionist interchangeably, and those terms are not interchangeable. Now, for example, Eric just mentioned my good friend Mark Lane, who inspired him to do research into the JFK assassination. Mark Lane was born into a Jewish family, but he is outspokenly anti-Zionist. He is a very big critic of Israel. And that is a good example right there of someone who, although they are of Jewish descent, they definitely can most certainly not be called a Zionist. Zionism is Jewish nationalism, the desire to have a Jewish state. And, of course, in 1948, there was a Jewish state established in Israel. Now, if you look at Jewish power in America prior to the establishment of the Zionist state of Israel, you'll find that it was, in fact, quite substantial, beginning roughly in the 1850s and 1860s. But by the 1880s and 1890s, it was quite substantial. So discussion of Jewish power is something that's entirely different from Zionist power. I would say, though, that the fulfillment of absolute Zionist control, or at least the move towards fulfillment of control, came on November 22nd, 1963, when the last American president to stand up to the Zionist lobby in Washington, John F. Kennedy, was killed. And after that, there was a 180-degree turnabout in U.S. foreign policy. The United States allowed Israel to develop nuclear weapons. It began massive shipments of taxpayer-based foreign aid funds and also military support to Israel. And in subsequent years, the Zionist lobby in Washington continued to increase its power. I think what's most telling about Zionist power in America is that you cannot discuss it. You are not allowed to openly discuss it, else your heads will be cut off. But it's very interesting. Just a couple years ago, in the Washington Post, which is a powerful newspaper, which, needless to say, is part of the American establishment, really the international establishment, they actually had a headline story on one of the inner pages saying that there was that many people were concerned that there were too many Catholics on the Supreme Court. Now, I can't imagine the Washington Post ever having a story saying that there were too many Catholic or too many Jews on the Supreme Court or too many Zionists on the Supreme Court. So I would say that the assassination of John F. Kennedy laid the groundwork for the rise of Zionist power, solidified it here in Washington. But George W. Bush, with his determination to place all these hardline, fanatic Zionist extremists in positions of influence, has really solidified their power in this country. And God bless us all, because the plans they have for this world are very destructive.
Okay, the break's coming on here, and I want to just mention, if you guys, while you're talking, I'm going to let Eric speak for after the next break, and I'm going to ask him the same question. But in the second half hour, when I ask the question, if you guys want to ask a question while the person's talking, please, ask me, and then we'll do that without interrupting to make it a little bit more stimulating. We're going to be back in 3 minutes on the Investigative Journal. Okay, we are back. The great debate here on the Investigative Journal, and America deserves answers. Who are the real enemies? Author Michael Collins Piper believes it's the Zionists. He explained what the term Zionism means and how they came to power briefly. And now we're going to ask that same question to author Eric Phelps. He wrote Vatican Assassins. He believes it's the Jesuits. Eric, how did they come to power?
How did the Zionists come to power?
No, the Jesuits.
The Jesuits. The Jesuits were created as a result of the Protestant Reformation, and they were formally created or chartered by Pope Paul III in 1540. And their purpose was to destroy the Protestant Reformation and bring all the nations back that had separated from the temporal power of the Pope to the Pope's spiritual and temporal power. They also were created, which I just recently learned, to do war with the Saracens, to go to war with the Muslims of the Middle East. So they were created for this purpose, and as they had their constitutions that were written, they had their secret instructions, they set out to regain the world for the Pope. What the Pope did not know is that the Jesuit order is an order completely within and of itself, and that it has its own agenda. And for 2 centuries, they began to amalgamate all their power into their hands. They were behind assassinations, regicides, usury. They were ultimately suppressed from France, Portugal, Spain, and all their holdings in South America. They were sent back to Civitavecchia, and they were ultimately suppressed with the papal bull Dominic Acredemptor Noster in 1773 by Pope Clement XIV. As a result of that, the Jesuits launched and waged a French Revolution. They punished all the monarchs of Europe that had suppressed them, including the Knights of Malta, drove them from their islands, confiscated all their treasures and weapons to conduct a crusade into Egypt to kill the Mamelukes that were protecting the Egyptian caliph there. In 1814, the Jesuits were revived after Napoleon deliberately betrayed his army, sacrificed it at Waterloo. And then from there on, the Jesuits have sought complete and total control over the papacy, which really culminated in 1870 with Vatican I and the doctrine of papal infallibility. By centralizing all power in the Pope, they could then control the entire Roman Catholic hierarchy and institution through that one man of theirs. And then, because in the 1800s, most of the Roman Catholic countries of Europe had expelled the Jesuits, except Belgium. They then fled to Britain and the United States, and they made Britain and the United States their bases of operation to launch what I call in my book the Second 30 Years' War, which began in 1914 and ended in 1945. And they punished all the nations in Europe that had expelled them, had suppressed them, including France. France had expelled them in 1880 and in 1901. Germany had expelled them in 1872 with Bismarck. Spain had expelled them in 1868 and again in 1932. Nation after nation had expelled them. Russia had expelled them in 1820. They remained formally expelled from Russia until Lenin readmitted them in 1922. So they were getting back. It was their Jesuit vengeance during the 1900s with their Second 30 Years' War. What they did was they created the Cold War, and during the Cold War they then established their state. there's Zionist state of Israel controlling what I call the post-Masonic Jewish Zionists, which aided them in their European Holocaust, which aided them in their mass murdering of the Russian Orthodox people throughout the Soviet Empire. And because they were so obedient to the Jesuits, in 1946, the Jesuits removed their statute forbidding any Jews to be in the order, and so now there are many Jews openly and secretly within the Jesuit order.
Well, here's what we're going to do. We got a couple minutes here before the break, and I definitely am going to ask both of you how the Zionists are destroying our country at this present moment. I know Michael has a lot of information about the Zionist lobby. I want to know also from you, Eric, how the Jesuits are working modernly now, what their agenda is, and how, from both of you, I think the American people need to know how these two groups interact. Are there any things in common? Do they have any? Do they work together? And do both of you address both of these groups? We have a minute here. Maybe someone wants to comment on what I just said.
Well, I'd like to ask Eric a question. I gather from having read his book and from reading material by people who are his supporters that he believes that Israel's intelligence service, the Mossad, is working on behalf of the Jesuits.
That's
Is that
correct? That's correct.
Okay, so you do accept the idea that Israel's intelligence service, the Mossad, was involved in the Kennedy assassination?
Yes, I do. In fact, I read your book this last week, and I have decided to put some things that you said in my third edition because I felt that I missed the importance of the JFK war with Israel, that I was somewhat snowed by John Loftus in his work, The Secret War Against the Jews, where he refuses to address that, so that indeed that if Kennedy could have ended the Cold War, that would have ended the Vatican's secret control and help for the nation of Israel through the United States, because the Vatican did not formally recognize Israel until 1993. So yes, I do accept your premise that the Mossad and the CIA work together, but that the Mossad is the tail and that the CIA is the head.
Okay, gentlemen, prepare a couple questions because I'm going to be asking you to ask each other some questions in the next half hour, and I do want to get down to modern day. What's going on with the Zionists? What's going on with the Jesuits? We'll be back in 3 minutes on the Investigative Journal. Okay, back, sitting on that park bench somewhere on a beautiful day with two very educated and very well-read people doing a debate about the real problems of America. Does it get any better than that? I mean, aren't we tired of being lied to, folks, my listeners? And I know I hear it over and over again. I am. I'm just tired of hearing Washington. I'm tired of hearing all the lies from everybody coming out of our government and out of all these religious organizations. I'm just tired of it. I'm glad we have two people here striving to get at the truth. Maybe I'll just, with a simplistic way, is it the Jesuits? Is it the Jews? I really don't know, but let's kick them both out and decide later. But, let's get some evidence right now. Anyway, on a more serious note, calm me down, Michael and Eric. Here's what I want to ask you guys. Okay, modernly, we have, I'm going to start with Michael, the Zionists. Okay, you're a critic of the Zionist lobby. I know that. You've come out strong against them and criticized for it. How do they interact? How have they taken over our government? How have they interacted with, we all will agree this is a religious war, with the Muslims, with Christians, with the Jews? How do the Zionists fit into this picture, and why do you believe they are the key to knowing who controls the New World Order? Go ahead, Michael.
Well, I think it's by sheer power of economic clout. If you look at the funding of the Zionist lobby in the United States, it comes from the wealthiest Zionist families in America. They have a very effective national network I should say a network in official Washington of very powerful lobbyists. And in every major city and even in small towns across America, you find very significant groupings of Jewish families who are very much involved in the Zionist movement, who have a lot of economic clout. The Zionist lobby is, beyond any question, the most powerful lobby, and pales in comparison, and I would just go as far as say pales in comparison to any Roman Catholic lobby. I mean, if I've always been told, now maybe this is wrong, but I've always been told that the Roman Catholic Church is against abortion, and yet abortion is legal. You can get an abortion anywhere in this country today. So if the Roman Catholic Church or the Jesuits running the Roman Catholic Church were as powerful as we're told, at least by Mr. Phelps, then I would think that abortion would have been totally outlawed in this country. But abortion is freely available, and that's just the way it is. So, I mean, frankly, I just want to make a comment right now.
Go right ahead.
Yeah, I find Mr. Phelps' thesis that the Israeli Mossad and that the Rothschild family and that all the other powerful elements in the Zionist movement that they are shills for the Jesuits to be absolutely, I don't want to be rude, but let me just put it, extraordinary.
Okay, that's fair.
And the only reason, and frankly, the only reason I agreed to this debate was because if I didn't agree to the debate, then my critics would be able to say, well, I ran from the debate. But, I mean, I guess what I'm confused is, you know, let me ask a question, if I could. Maybe it could clarify.
Yeah, that's fine, and then I'll ask the same question.
Yeah, I'd like to ask Mr. Phelps a question. Now, in his book and in some of his other writings related to his book, he very specifically, now at the beginning here, he just backed off on his reliance on John Loftus, who is a Zionist propagandist. Mr. Loftus is not Jewish, but he is a pro-Zionist propagandist. And in his book, Mr. Phelps relied heavily on the writings of John Loftus. Now, Mr. Phelps says in his book that the Jesuits didn't want JFK, that the Jesuits were upset because JFK sent conventional weapons to Israel, and the Jesuits then proceeded to have JFK killed because they considered JFK a good friend of Israel. Now, what I don't understand is, if the Jesuits set up the Zionist state in the first place, why wouldn't they then want JFK to give arms to Israel, or why wouldn't they want the Mossad to... Why then would they, or I should say, why then would they have the Mossad kill him? I mean, that's just illogical.
Eric?
Okay. With regard to that point on JFK and Israel, I think I may have been mistaken there. Okay? Especially in light of your information that JFK had a war with him. Now, I did use Loftus on several points. For example, Reinhard Gehlen, Knight of Malta, of the Gehlen Org, teaching the Mossad in 1951, training them. So there's a connection there to the Mossad with the CIA, which I bring out in my book.
Well, there's no doubt, there's no doubt about the fact that the CIA and the Mossad worked hand in hand. There's no question of that.
Okay, but if I might finish, the SS continued to exist by way of the CIA. And our whole intelligence agencies were Nazified when all the SS boys were brought in here by Cardinal Spellman and J. Edgar Hoover through the Vatican rat lines that existed after the war, and the very same Vatican rat lines that the Zionists use after the war also. So I'm not denying a Jesuit connection, but with regard to your question of JFK and Israel, I did not fully understand the JFK war with Israel, so that will be amended, but I did say that the Jesuits wanted to get rid of Kennedy because Kennedy wanted to end the Vietnam War, and the Jesuits wanted the Vietnam War. They wanted to get rid of Kennedy because in ending the Vietnam War, that would have ended, for the most part, this huge drug trade that the Black Pope runs through his mafia and through his international intelligence community, which is all tied together. It's all one. Furthermore, JFK wanted to splinter the CIA into 1,000 pieces. The CIA was a continuation of the SS. And so, therefore, if he would have done that, he would have broken the Jesuit general's intelligence power in this country. The extension of that, which to a certain degree you have helped me with, is that if JFK would have broken the power of the CIA, he would have broken the power of the Mossad. And that cannot be, because the Black Pope has full intentions of maintaining that nation of Israel in existence until he can have the third Hebrew temple rebuilt for the papacy. For which reason the Zionists deeded the old city to the papacy via Shimon Peres and Yossi Belan in 1993. So yes, I will say that those are the reasons why the Jesuits had Kennedy killed. And furthermore, Kennedy was resisting Cardinal Spellman. He had Diem. He participated in the assassination of Diem, who was a favorite of Cardinal Spellman. That was his inquisitor in Vietnam. And so therefore, in seeking to end Spelly's war Kennedy was an enemy of Spellman, and thus the Knights of Malta, which Cardinal Spellman commanded, which included James Angleton, Henry Luce, William F. Buckley, John McCone, the head of the CIA, Cartha DeLoach, the third in command of the FBI, all these knights in key positions at the time of the assassination.
Okay.
Wait, Michael, you asked the last question, and I wanted to get in the same question that I asked you to Eric now, if I could. How have the Jesuits, in your estimation, Eric, come to power modernly? How do they work?
The Jesuits, the High Jesuits, the Black Pope, controls all high-level Freemasonry. They wrote all the first 25 degrees in the College of Clermont in 1754, according to Masonic sources that I quote in my book. They wrote the last 8 degrees when they were taken and protected by Frederick the Great of Prussia and created the Supreme Council of the 33rd degree. So the Jesuits exercised their control over nations via high-level Freemasonry and the Knights of Malta. And this is your connection to the Supreme Court, particularly the Warren Supreme Court, that validates abortion, removes prayer, removes Bible reading. They do it by the power of their Jesuits at Georgetown University using high-level Freemasonry. And Freemasonry has the tie to Zionism.
Okay, are you finished, Eric?
Yes.
Okay, I wanted to ask Michael, based on what a statement he made, and I didn't have it on my question list, but since Michael brought it up, why do you think, and I'm interested in this as a journalist too, and not just a radio broadcaster, but someone looking at the truth, why is it so extraordinary to consider the fact that the Catholic Church and the Vatican may be a problem here, when maybe just some facts are interesting here. They own probably a quarter of the gold bullion in the world. They have land holdings that are immense. Why is it so extraordinary to think that?
Well, I didn't say it was extraordinary to think that the Catholic Church should be, quote-unquote, a problem. I just said that basically from what I have read in Mr. Phelps' book, I don't know a great deal about this, much of the history that he's talking about, so I can only accept his word on it just as his readers can and the listeners can. But I do know that in reading his account of the JFK assassination, I've found some egregious errors. I've found egregious reliance upon pro-Zionist sources that have been refuted elsewhere. And as Mr. Phelps has acknowledged here, he said there was a major flaw in his own work that has now caused him to reconsider it. I guess my concern is that. I know a lot of, on one side of my family, they were very devout Catholics. I was raised without religion, so I have no particular bias there. And in fact, in what studying I have done of the Catholic Church, it's my belief that as of the Vatican II conference, the Zionist elements played a major part in shifting the church. So in fact, it was the Zionists who came in and infiltrated the Catholic Church, if anybody infiltrated anything. I just like to say that, like Mr. Phelps suggests, that the modern-day CIA, he just said here in his program, the modern-day CIA is a kind of like an evolution of the Nazi SS. Nothing could be further from the truth. As all histories of the CIA know, critical writers critical of the CIA know, the CIA evolved from the Office of Strategic Services here in the United States. The Office of Strategic Services was a nest of Zionists and communists, not Jesuits.
The Office of Strategic Services, if I might respond, was headed by a Knight of Malta named Wild Bill Donovan. And his first allegiance was to Pius XII. And his right-hand man was another Knight of Malta named James Angleton, the man you rightly finger as one of the key people in the Kennedy assassination.
Well, now in the Kennedy assassination, he also, but this doesn't take into consideration the fact that in 1948 the State of Israel was established, and James Angleton became the liaison to Israel, a very jealous pro-Israel liaison to Israel in the CIA. Mr. Donovan faded from the scene, and I think he may have even been dead by 1963. I'm not clear on that, but
my
his
point
question
is
of the fact that he's a member of the Knights of Malta, he could also be a member of the Rotary Club, but that doesn't mean the Rotary was behind the Kennedy assassination. Another thing too, you talk about the mafia being an element of the Jesuits. Well, I saw someone recently, one of your supporters, criticize me for saying that the Mossad was involved in the Kennedy assassination and saying it was very clear that the mafia involvement was the outgrowth of the Jesuits. Well, the thing is, as I pointed out on my program, and I'll point out here again, if you look at the history of the Chicago Mafia as written by Sam Giancana's nephew in his book Double Deal, written with Michael Corbett, he makes it very clear that the real head of organized crime in Chicago was a Jewish-born pro-Zionist gentleman by the name of Hyman Larner, who was a partner of Meyer Lansky. Neither of those fellows were Jesuits, and I have never seen any evidence to suggest that Jewish organized crime figures like Hyman Larner and Meyer Lansky, among many, many others, were acting as agents of the Jesuits. There is just absolutely no evidence to support that.
I guess one question I want to ask both you guys, and it lingers on my mind, and it's this. We know that if we look into history, that a lot of history has been changed. I mean, you can sit in your 12th grade history class and now go back and read your history books, and I'm appalled. I mean, I wasted a lot of time. History has been changed. Many things aren't as they seem. And how deep do both you guys really want to go when it comes to finding the truth? And this is a real open-ended question for both of you, because I want to go right to the bottom of it and find out. I don't care who it is. But you know something? I don't usually, when I deal with these people in government, when they say left, I look right. And I wonder if both of you subscribe to that, and if both of you can comment on what you think about. You guys research everything, but how do you ever think that maybe a lot of this stuff has been contrived, and what is really going on? Whoever wants to answer can answer.
Well, I believe that the Council on Foreign Relations controls the press. Controls both parties, controls the banking, controls academia, and the CFR is controlled by the Archbishop of New York in the days of the Kennedy assassination, Francis Cardinal Spellman. St. Patrick's Cathedral was called the Powerhouse. That was the place that all of New York was run. And the ADL is subordinate to the Archbishop of New York. And thus, today, it's the Archbishop Edward Cardinal Egan who runs New York and thus runs the country via the CFR. This is a Jesuit maxim. One of the Jesuit maxims is you rule through a trusted third party. And the trusted third party in America is the CFR. The trusted third party in Britain is the Royal Institute for International Affairs. And so as they rule through this trusted third party, they stay behind the scenes while their lobbyists and others do all their bidding for them. Men like that wicked Charles Schumer, 33rd degree Jewish Freemason, member of the CFR. Men like William F. Buckley Jr., member of the CFR, Knight of Malta, Skull and Bones. The Bushes, Prescott Bush Jr. is a Knight of Malta. His brother, George H.W. Walker, Herbert Walker Bush, he's also a Knight of Malta, entertained the Grand Master of the Knights of Malta at the White House in 1988. So the head of the Council on Foreign Relations is, in fact, the Archbishop of New York, and one of his key Jesuits was the former president of Fordham University, Joseph A. O'Hare, who was the one who successfully got Michael Bloomberg as the mayor of New York City, campaigned for him to win.
Michael?
Well, I just have to say, in all candor, and I don't mean to be rude, but I think everything that we've just heard from Mr. Phelps is a lot of nonsense. I mean, the Council on Foreign Relations and the Royal Institute of International Affairs, which he mentioned, are divisions of the Rothschild financial empire. The Rothschild family set up the Royal Institute for International Affairs to conduct British foreign policy on their behalf, because the Rothschild family essentially took over the British Empire, and they set up the Council on Foreign Relations as an American adjunct of the Royal Institute for International Affairs. And in his book, Mr. Phelps contends that the Rothschild family are actually agents of the Jesuits. Nothing could be further from the truth. If anything, the Catholic Church and the Jesuits are in decline in this country, just as they are in Europe and around the world. I think Mr. Phelps' contention just falls on its illogical face.
Okay, we're going to take a break, and Eric Phelps can respond to that. when we get back in 3 minutes on the Investigative Journal. Okay, back on the Investigative Journal. And if and only if there's just one slight chance we can delay or stop this New World Order, I hope this debate does that. Because that's all we got left, folks. I mean, they have all the power. They have all the money. They have all the control. And, you know, we get into these debates. And one thing interesting, I don't think, and let me just add my 2 cents into this, I don't think we're ever going to get at the truth behind Kennedy and 9/11 and other things in the present state of our government and our judiciary. I had people on here time and time again who are trying to get at the truth, and they get blocked in the judiciary, in the legislature. There is no hope going there. I always said that, and I believe that wholeheartedly, that the truth lies in each individual's opinion, each individual's free will and free choice to seek the truth out without any type of what I would call censorship that goes on in the mainstream media. At least that's what we do here. And these two guys are showing, they're laying it on the line from their opinions, and I respect both of them. Now, getting back to what Eric, I guess Michael made a statement, and Eric, you were going to respond.
Yes. Well, I believe Michael mentioned that he felt that the Rothschilds ruled the CFR, and thus the World Institute for International Affairs. And thus, if that be the case, what we have is international Jewish supremacy. That in fact, the Jews, or these high-level Masonic Jewish Zionists, rule the world. Would that be a correct conclusion, Michael?
Yeah, essentially. We'll just leave it at that. That's
okay.
Good enough for anything, yeah.
Okay. So what I'm saying is that according to the Bible, which I accept as my final rule of faith and practice, in Revelation 17:18, the woman that is described there is a great city. And I believe that great city sitting on 7 hills or 7 mountains is Rome, and that city is described as it reigneth over the kings of the earth, in Revelation 17:18. So the political power, I believe, according to that verse, is Rome. And Rome is Gentile. It is not Jew. We go also to Luke chapter 21, when the Lord Jesus Christ spoke, and he said, when you shall see Jerusalem encompassed with armies, and know that its desolation is near, then let them who are in the Judea flee to the mountains. It goes on and so forth, and it says, and they shall fall by the edge of the sword, and shall be led away captive unto all nations. And Jerusalem shall be trodden down by the Gentiles until the times of the Gentiles be fulfilled. And when is the fulfillment or the ending of the times of the Gentiles? Christ then describes it as, and there'll be signs in the sun and in the moon, and men's hearts failing them for fear, and then the Son of Man comes. So from the destruction of Jerusalem to the return of the Son of God, the Lord Jesus Christ, is called the times of the Gentiles. Therefore, pursuant to these passages, we live in a time period where Gentiles rule. And Deuteronomy 28:44 says the same thing. It's the Gentiles who are the head and the Jews who are the tail, not vice versa. And my concern is that if we come to this conclusion that it's the Jews essentially that are responsible for this, the Jews in general led by their Masonic Jewish Zionists, this will lead to a Hitlerian Holocaust in North America. And if that is the conclusion the American people want to make, then Genesis 12 is going to come into play, and this nation will be cursed exactly as Germany was cursed, and we will suffer our undoing. Rather, I would say, look to the Jesuit order. They are the ultimate Zionists. If you look at the Dreyfus Affair, the Jesuits caused the whole Dreyfus Affair when they had Captain Alfred Dreyfus illegally convicted. And who was there at the trial? None other than Theodore Herzl, so that he could start his Zionist movement with his audience that he had with the Pope in 1904.
I am going to have to take a break. We're going to get back with my two guests in 3 minutes on the Investigative Journal. Okay, the Investigative Journal, and we have a debate going on. Is it the Zionists? Is it the Jews? Is it the Jesuits? Is it the Catholics? Who are really pulling the strings behind the New World Order? And I'll tell you, things are starting to heat up a little bit. And the reason they are is because it's important. It's important that everybody expresses their opinion. And it's also important to understand, and I hope my two guests understand this carefully and listen to me carefully, is that behind the scenes of all of what we're talking about today, I've made it a point in my life to interview constantly over the last years numerous people who have been wronged by what's going on. People who have been illegally jailed, people who have been tortured with microwave weaponry and other just insidious things going on in this country. Our rights being taken away. So for me, you know something? We deserve to find out who these people are. And that's why the two biggest candidates that I hear going on are the Zionists and the Jesuits. Michael, I know I wanted to ask you this question, or did you want to respond to what Eric was saying last time?
Well, yeah.
Go ahead.
Well, go ahead and ask me your question. Maybe I can work it all together. I mean, I'd like to answer your questions, too. Go ahead.
Yeah, my question to you is, who are, when I talk about the Catholic Church and I talk about the Jesuits, I can go to who these guys are in a sense. I mean, I can go to Borgo Santo Spirito Cinque, where I've been numerous times and passed numerous times as a correspondent there, and have talked to a number of priests regarding this issue years ago, and I can pinpoint. But when I talk about Zionism, who are the leaders? I mean, is there one? Is there many?
Oh,
and I want to know that from you, from your research.
Excellent question, because it's a direct segue into what I wanted to comment on in regard to some of the things.
Remember, we have 2 minutes, and then we're going to take a break, so go ahead.
Okay,
the routine.
Eric has contended that the Anti-Defamation League is an agent of the Jesuits. I think that falls flat when you consider the fact that the Anti-Defamation League has stood virtually in opposition to all of the public stands of the Catholic Church on virtually every issue you can think of, and has been a very fierce foe of the Catholic Church. So the Anti-Defamation League is very clearly not an agent of the Jesuits, although it is a very, very influential unit of the Zionist Freemasonic movement in this country, and certainly with links to powerful interests around the world. It is not the Jesuits who control ABC, CBS, NBC, or U.S. News and World Report, or Time, or Newsweek. The Zionists and people under the thumb of the Zionists are in control of these major news networks and magazines. And as American Free Press always says, the media is the enemy. You don't find the Jesuit order running those networks. You don't find the Jesuit order running the Anti-Defamation League. You find very powerful Zionist Jewish families running those elements that dictate public policy in America, that dictate who gets elected, that send Catholic politicians like Jim Trafficant to jail, for example, by trumping up false charges against him that are broadcast throughout the media. No, the Jesuits are of no substantial influence in this country. Not at all. The Zionists, however, are.
Okay, and we're going to go into this break, and I don't want to cut anybody off. And we have, let me just, for my callers, just because you guys are, there's a whole bunch of callers lining up, and I don't want to forget you. So hold on, be patient. I have some more questions. I know Eric and Mike have questions of each other, and we will get to those calls, though. Great debate. Back in 3 minutes on the Investigative Journal. Okay, back for the final hour, and this is kind of short. I wish I had a few more hours. This is going too fast, and there are just so many things to get at. We're going to do the best we can, and I want to thank both my guests for coming on. And let me just tell you who they are again. It's Michael Collins Piper. You know him as a talk show host on RBM from 6 to 7 every day, and he's written 2 books called The New Jerusalem, Zionist Power in America, and then Final Judgment, The Missing Link in the JFK Assassination Conspiracy. And Eric John Phelps, my other guest, has written 3 books called The Vatican Assassins. He's finishing the 3rd edition. And both of them trying to get at the truth behind what's happening in America. Both are pointing to a different enemy. They may be interlocked somewhere along the line, but we need to find out. A question I have, and I think I want to ask this, a real vital question. Right now we're engaged in a war, according to the Bush administration, on terror. Many soldiers are dying as we speak. Many other innocents are dying in Iraq and all over the Middle East. How do the Zionists, Michael, and I assume we're finished with the last topic. If not, you guys can add in after I ask this question. But anyway, how are the Zionists intermingling with the Muslims? If the enemy is not the Muslims, how then have they? How have they infiltrated the Muslim peoples?
Well, I think actually, this brings up a point. I've written another book which a lot of the listeners have read and are familiar with, The High Priests of War, and that's an account of the rise of these neoconservative pro-Israel war hawks who directed the Bush administration into this war against Iraq, and now they're aiming for Iran, and they have already made it clear in their writings and pronouncements that it's a war against the entire Muslim world. And I think it's important to point out that the Vatican, now Mr. Phelps says the Vatican is under the control of the Jesuits. The Vatican opposed the war against Iraq. So if the Vatican, under the control of the Jesuits, is in fact really in favor of a war against the Muslim world, then they would have wholeheartedly supported the Iraq war, which they did not. In fact,
respond?
Well, let me just make one more point. The Civiltica Cattolica, which is a Vatican-approved newspaper, even went so far as to suggest that a lot of the newspaper overemphasis on some of these sex scandals in the Vatican and in the Catholic Church, which are rightly being reported, I might add. They said that the overemphasis of that was because of the mass media being disturbed about the fact that the Vatican did not support the war against Iraq. And as I said, if you look at who controls the mass media in America and certainly in a lot of places in Europe, you will find that it is not the Jesuits, it is the pro-Zionists and the Zionists.
Eric, I'm going to ask you the same question. Go ahead.
Okay. In response to Mr. Piper's statement that the Vatican is openly against the Iraq war, this is par for the course. The Vatican always has an open policy, and that is not their true policy. Their true policy is their secret policy. For example, the Jesuits controlled Bavaria. They control all of Munich for centuries. In fact, Bavaria was called the Jesuit stronghold north of the Alps. It's out of Bavaria that we have the first 30 Years' War, from 1618 to 1648. It's the very same Jesuit-controlled Bavaria out of which comes the Nazi Party. But what is the open policies of a man by the name of Jesuit Meyer? Why, they're openly against the rise of Hitler. But secretly, they backed him, they manned his SS, they were involved in making Croatia that horrible Ustashi state that killed nearly 1 million Jews and Orthodox Serbs. So they always have an open policy, but that's not their true policy. They have a secret policy, and their secret policy is they're completely and totally behind this war against the Muslim world. James Angleton called for a war against Islam back in the 70s. Francis Xavier said, give me a world without Muslims and a world without Jews, pursuant to Boyd Barrett's great work that I have. No, that's their secret policy, and as evidence of that, because I maintain that the Archbishop of New York is controlled by the Jesuits of Fordham University, and the Archbishop controls the Knights of Malta, the American tongue in this country. It was George J. Tenet, one of the few holdovers of the Clinton administration, who is a member of the Knights of Malta. He was educated by Jesuits at their Georgetown Jesuits, at their School of Foreign Service. He's a member of the Council on Foreign Relations, and he's one of the linchpins responsible for 9/11 and thus this papal crusade against the Muslim world.
Okay, and Mike, let me get back to this question and see if I get it right here from Michael's point of view and your point of view, Eric. Michael, basically then, we have the situation where our government has been usurped by what you say the Zionist power, in that they have put controls on the CIA and the Mossad, and basically have they, in your estimation, taken over the leaders of the Muslim world to create this war? How does that interact? How have they done this to really create this enemy called Al-Qaeda from your point of view? And then I want to ask Eric the same question on whether he believes the Jesuits are behind this infiltration. Go ahead.
Okay,
Michael.
well, that's a pretty tall order, especially in regard to
well, we got a lot on the line here. I got people dying.
Yeah, I guess. Actually, I'll tell you something. I would like to make a suggestion. I am so confident in my position that I would be willing to have all people who are calling in support of my position hang up the phone right now, and I will only talk to people who stand with Eric and against my position because I feel so strongly about it. So,
you're not going to believe this. Most of the callers are for both of you, so that's interesting.
Well, in any case.
But anyway, I'll take that.
Yeah,
okay.
In any case, what I was about to say was that now Eric says that the Vatican has. He wants us to believe that the Vatican says one thing publicly when it really means one thing privately. Well, I guess, does he believe that also applies to, say, the issue of abortion?
That's correct.
Okay, so the Vatican is actually pro-abortion.
Secretly, the Jesuits are behind abortion. Absolutely. They perfected it in the convents with the nuns.
Okay, I just wanted to get that clarified for the public record here. I don't believe that, but then again, earlier, Eric, you cited the Bible, and you suggested that the Bible the city of the seven hills refers to Rome. I have heard Christian pastors such as Reverend Ted Pike, who's a very popular figure in RBN. I believe Reverend Pike in one of his videos suggests that actually that city referred to is actually Jerusalem. So I guess what I'm saying here is that we can't have a serious debate if we are going to base it on one man's interpretation of the Bible, because there are so many different interpretations of the Bible that we could go on and on and on in discussing that. Now,
okay, but what I'm saying is that's my position so that the listener understands the foundation from which I come.
But, well, I get that's important, and I understand that, but on the other hand, when we're looking at the very specific things that are happening in our world today, we have to deal with facts. Now,
I agree.
Like in terms of the Kennedy assassination, you contend that Cardinal Spellman of New York, and I have no special brief for Cardinal Spellman, you say that he was a mastermind of the Kennedy assassination.
That's correct.
You say that he was a Knight of Malta, and you also say that Clay Shaw in New Orleans, who's very well known from JFK's film, or from the JFK film, you say that he was a Knight of Malta.
Yes, sir.
I have looked up. I have checked the Joan Mellon. She's been a guest on Greg's show. Very good interview, by the way, Greg.
Thank you.
Joan Mellon. She has in her book, which is an authoritative book on the Clay Shaw affair. I could not find a single reference to Clay Shaw being a Knight of Malta. I checked Paris Flamand's first landmark work on the subject, the Kennedy conspiracy. I could find no reference to.
Well, I may be able to help here, and I will send you both an email from Joe in California, who is collecting information for me regarding the Knights of Malta, and he sent me a list of about 50 people. Clay Shaw's name was on it, so you can ask him where he got it.
Yeah, well, this is the problem. I did some Internet research the other day, and the only references I could find to Clay Shaw being a Knight of Malta have been people reflecting upon what Eric wrote in his book. Another authoritative author on the Clay Shaw connection is James D. Eugenio, and I have some criticisms of him, but in his book, the title of which escapes me, I think it's a very similar title to Joan Mellon's book. In his book on the Clay Shaw affair, he has absolutely no references to Mr. Shaw being a member of the Knight of Malta. Now, we talk about John McCone being a member of the Knight of Malta. I'm pretty sure that's correct. There's only one problem in the context of Mr. Phelps' thesis in his book, Vatican Assassins, and that is this, that what he does not mention is the fact that John McCone was a very, very, very close friend of the Kennedy family. He was put in charge of the CIA precisely because the Kennedys wanted their own man in charge of the CIA, and what makes it all the more interesting is the fact that when McCone was placed in charge of the CIA, the Kennedys conducted their intelligence operations against Israel and the spying on Israeli nuclear weapons through John McCone's office and kept it out of the hands of James Angleton. So to suggest that John McCone, a Knight of Malta, and a friend of the Kennedy family, was collaborating with James Angleton, who was an Israeli loyalist, to say that they were working together against the Kennedy family just doesn't stand. They were on two opposite sides of the Israeli question vis-a-vis the nuclear bomb and U.S. support for Israel, to the point that even Mr. McCone, prior to the time he became CIA director, was head of the Atomic Energy Commission here in the United States.
Yes, he was.
And it was Mr. McCone who leaked the word that Israel was building a nuclear bomb. So the very suggestion that the Knights of Malta were behind the Kennedy assassination falls. It falls flat. The facts refute that.
Okay, we're going to be back. I have to take a break. Back in 3 minutes on the Investigative Journal. All right, we're back on the Investigative Journal. And, I applaud both my guests, Michael for taking his research and looking into the Zionists, and Eric Phelps, of course, for taking his research and looking into the Jesuits. It's as if I got a picture in my mind, this road that comes to this fork, and one going left, one going right, And then, did they ever meet anywhere? I guess my question, I want to ask, let me ask Eric first. I always ask Michael first, and then I'll ask Eric or Michael the same question. And it boils down to this. You're both researching the same thing. You both want to get at the same apple, so to speak. You find out different things. Now, do you think, Eric, that Michael's research into the Zionists is helpful, hurtful, and do you feel that he covers the Vatican enough in his research, or is just ignoring it?
Well, I think that a lot of his research is very helpful. It's helped me. The Zionist connection is extremely important, and where he takes it with regard to all these specific Masonic Jewish Zionists is very, very good. However, I do not feel that he deals with the Jesuit order really at all in the Vatican enough, especially in the light of certain facts like these. In 1993, Yossi Beilin and Shimon Peres were responsible in the heat of Oslo of secretly deeding the old city of Jerusalem, especially the Temple Mount, to the papacy. Now that's a very, very important fact to show that the Zionists who run Israel are working for the benefit of the papacy. Why in the world, if they would run the world, would they ever do such a thing as that? That's very important. So I feel that Michael would do well to consider the Jesuit history. On my CD I put out with 13 old books, it goes back to their history some 150 years prior to this time, and it's worthy of a reconsideration, especially when we see the Jesuits involved in the initial creation of Zionism with the Dreyfus Affair, and that the Rothschilds have been known as the keepers of the Vatican treasury for at least a century and a half to 2 centuries.
And I'm going to ask Michael the same question that I asked Eric, but just flip-flop it. Do you think his looking into the Vatican is helpful or hurtful? And do you feel that he has ignored the Zionist movement?
Well, I find that, all right, this requires a very careful answer. My problem with Eric's writing is that he attributes so many of the crimes or events or actions or financial interests of what he describes as the Jesuits, or to he says it like, say, he'll say the Jesuits control something or another, whether it's the Council on Foreign Relations or the Anti-Defamation League or the State of Israel, when in fact nothing could be further from the truth. I read his entire book, The Vatican Assassins, in the edition. It has what I have it in front of me here, like 695 pages. And more often than not, I'm afraid there are so many errors, at least in the area regarding the Kennedy assassination. Errors, a few of which I have refuted here today, that it leads me to question everything else he has written on the subject. I mean, I do know a little bit about the Kennedy assassination, and as I say, there are so many errors in what he has presented, blaming the Jesuits for the crime, that one could easily make the argument that if, in fact, the Jesuits were behind the JFK assassination, Mr. Phelps's book, Vatican Assassins, is really nothing more than a put-up job by the Jesuits as another one of their front black propaganda operations to convince people that the Jesuits weren't involved, because there are so many arguments against it based upon the errors that appear in Mr. Phelps' book. So I think we have to consider that possibility. That there are just so many errors in the book in regard to the Kennedy assassination and it relies on sources that are biased. For example, he relies on Emanuel Josephson. Dr. Josephson was a Jewish fellow in New York who wrote all these books saying that it was really the Rockefellers who ran America through the Council on Foreign Relations, and very studiously ignored, for example, the fact that the Rothschild Empire and their American satellites were responsible for putting the Rockefellers in place. And Eustace Mullins, who's very familiar to many listeners on this network, has written very critically in his books about the disinformation put forth by Emanuel Josephson.
Let me just ask one question.
Eustace isn't a Jesuit.
If you could ask, since you brought it up, Mike, let me ask this question, and if I can't get to the answer from both of you, we'll just go in the next half hour. Then I have to take some calls if you guys don't mind. But the point is, you brought up, you said Eric's work might be a black op job done by the Jesuits.
I don't really believe that.
Okay.
Yeah.
But here's the point. I want to ask both of you. I'll start out with Eric. Eric, and I never asked either of you this question, and I think the listeners should know. Both you guys write books. Has anybody, Eric, funded your book? Are you working for any organization that we don't know about? And if we looked hard, could we ever find any?
No, I don't work for any organization, and I work pretty much from hand to mouth, week to week. But there's no organization that supports me openly or privately.
Michael, now you've written books. Has anybody ever funded your books?
I can tell you that the only people that when I put my book Final Judgment together, it was originally published by Liberty Lobby, and it barely got published. It wouldn't have gotten published if I wouldn't have pushed it myself. There were people on the staff there who were working to prevent the book from getting published. So, no, it's just little old me, and in the old days, Liberty Lobby, now American Free Press.
Okay, good. We're going to be back 3 minutes on the Investigative Journal. Okay, back again on the Investigative Journal. And, I've got one more question, but before I do that, I don't want to run out of time. I am going to get to the callers, and we got a lot of them, so we're going to get to them. But I do want our two guests, first we'll start with Michael. Can you, because I know our listeners may want to get all these books, look into them, make their own minds up, and that's what this is all about. Michael, how can our listeners get a hold of your, I think it's 3 books now, correct?
Mm-hmm, yeah.
How can they get a hold of those?
Well, they can, on the Internet, they can go to AmericanFreePress.net, AmericanFreePress.net, and they can order them there, or they can call American Free Press at the toll-free number at 888-699-NEWS, 888-699-NEWS, and they can order them there.
And Eric, how can we get a hold of your books?
Okay, the first one's out of print. Second one, I really can't offer it. The third one the VA3 should be available by mid-June or the 1st of July. I'm working towards that deadline real hard.
Okay, and I've got one last question. Then I'll get to callers, and we're going to save about 4 or 5 minutes at the end for each of our guests to make a final statement. And let me ask this question. And this one, kind of not a personal question, but just a journalistic, I guess, aside and a question in there somewhere. When I first started covering stories in the mainstream media, I was censored on stories that had to do with both Jews and both Jesuits and Catholics. And let me tell you how. I used to cover stories in Rome. I used to write stories in different newspapers in America. And mostly when I was overseas, these stories never saw the light of day. They don't see the light of day now, and I doubt if any of these discussions that we have today would ever get on a channel in the mainstream, and I don't think any of my two guests would disagree with me. However, when we get into the alternative press, and I've decided to do that, basically, to get at the truth, as we're doing today. I have been one of the few to tackle both these issues. Whether people agree or not, the people that I have written about have opinions, and I still think that each person's opinion counts, and we should, especially when we're undergoing such a crisis in our country, to uncover every stone. What I find, and I want to get both my guests' opinions on this, and maybe Michael, he writes too, Eric, you're out there writing in the alternative press, and get your opinion. When I write about Zionism, I don't get attacked as much. In fact, I can write about it and get a lot of people applauding what I do. When I write about it in the alternative press, I not only get attacked heavily, but many of my stories don't appear a lot of places. And I am wondering, what's going on? Why is that just happening to me? Michael, does it happen? Have you heard this before?
Well, you're talking about when you write about Jesuits.
Well, when I bring people, and let's say when I write about them, I mean, when I just interview somebody who has an opinion about them, I get attacked. And I keep telling people, I'm just writing what they are saying. I'm the journalist, the messenger. Well, they're kind of saying, don't bring the message. But I get attacked. But when I write about a Zionist story, I don't.
Well,
in the alternative press now.
Actually, it's kind of funny because I think it goes both ways, because there are a lot of people in what you might call the alternative press and radio who will not talk, who just strictly will not talk about Zionism whatsoever,
yeah.
Because they'd rather blame it on the Illuminati or the Committee of 300 or the Council on Foreign Relations. Now, as far as the issue of...
And let me say that you're very correct when you say that, and I really mean that. You are correct. Go ahead.
Whereas this question now, as far as I'm concerned, as I say, my concern about this issue of the Jesuits is that I know that as far as the Kennedy assassination is concerned, I don't think any semblance of a serious argument can be made that the Jesuits were the masterminds behind the Kennedy assassination. The issue of the Lincoln assassination, I couldn't say because I have not done enough research on that. But on the other hand, I've seen some very convincing research which suggests that there were Zionist Jewish elements behind Lincoln's assassination.
Yeah.
But
here's one thing, though, a point that if I could bring up to both of you that I don't want this to be, I want this in this interview. In 1867, this is fact, after the Lincoln assassination, America, the U.S., cut off all diplomatic relations with the Vatican. And that story goes deep and deep and deep. We did not reinstitute diplomatic relations with the Vatican until Ronald Reagan. Now, that story, boy, I'll tell you why. What is going on there? There's a lot of things going on. And people say that the reason they cut off relations with the Vatican is because they were hiding some of the hitmen that killed Lincoln. A lot of the history was hidden until it was uncovered in a Quebec house. I've had the guest on my show that wrote the book about that incident, and it is well worth reading about the Lincoln assassination. My question is, everything always changes but remains the same. That's an old adage that I grew up, my grandfather kept telling me that. So I really still think that it's important to research both the Zionist movement and the Vatican affair. But anyway, now I forgot about my question. I guess it was regarding what I was talking about as far as this getting attacked for these kind of stories, and I find it kind of strange, and that's my personal experience. And I'm not saying it's anybody else's, but I just want to go on the record saying that.
I might also add too that I failed to bring up was the doctrine of the Pope's temporal power. And as you see the two keys on the papal flag, one represents his supposed spiritual power, and the other is his temporal power. And the temporal power of the Pope says that the Pope has the right to rule the governments of every nation of the world. And this is one of the maxims that the Jesuits work upon, that because of this supposed right to rule every government, they have the right to usurp them all by any means necessary, including third-party Zionists.
Michael, one last comment. I want to get to callers. Go ahead.
Well, I don't think anybody has any doubt in their mind that every religious movement, whether it's the Vatican or whether it's Zionism or whether it's Jehovah's Witnesses, have a desire to rule the world and institute their own religious philosophy. I guess my concern is that there isn't any evidence that the Zionists or that the Vatican orchestrated the Kennedy assassination for the reasons that Mr. Phelps has outlined in his book, and then that raises questions about everything else. But as I say, my focus on the Kennedy assassination has convinced me beyond any doubt that there is no evidence of Jesuit involvement, but that the evidence of Zionist involvement for Zionist motives, not Jesuit motives, is paramount.
Okay, well, let's get to, I got a whole bunch of callers. Marilyn in California, you've been waiting the longest. You're on the Investigative Journal.
Yeah, thanks for this incredible debate. I got a statement and then a couple of questions for each man. Throughout history, the Catholic Church has known to be, they call themselves the one true church, and they also have persecuted and killed millions of Christians who refuse to bow the knee to the Pope and refute the Word of God. I'd like to ask each man, this debate at its core appears to me to be a Catholic worldview versus a Christian worldview. Could each of you comment on that?
Who'd like to go first?
I'll let Eric go.
Go ahead, Eric.
Okay. I would say that you're correct as far as I'm not sure what your religious faith is, Michael, but my position is that the Bible is the final authority of faith and practice. Therefore, it's historically Protestant, historically Christian, historically Baptist, and a Calvinist in my position of the persuasion. And therefore, it's the same Hegelian dialectic of the Reformation versus the Counter-Reformation that has continued to this day, that the doctrines of the Reformation, an open Bible, freedom of speech, freedom of the press, versus the Jesuit Order's Counter-Reformation, Council of Trent, condemning freedom of conscience, condemning freedom of speech, freedom of the press in the fourth session of the Council. So, yes, I would agree with you there, ma'am.
Well, I would strongly disagree for the simple reason that I am not a Catholic, number one. I was actually baptized in the United Church of Christ, and that was about the extent of my religious training and upbringing. The fact is that I have focused on the issue of Zionist involvement in the Kennedy assassination, and Mr. Phelps' book is entitled Vatican Assassins, and it hinges on this theory that the Jesuits were behind the Kennedy assassination, and yet, as I pointed out, only probably in about 50% of the errors that I've actually found in his book, I find that this theme that the Jesuits were behind the Kennedy assassination is just wrong.
Marilyn,
so it's not a matter of a religious debate; it's a matter of facts.
Marilyn, do you have any other questions?
Yes.
Quickly, though, I have other callers.
Go ahead with the other callers. Thank you for
okay, and thanks, Marilyn. I want to go on record. She put down she was for both guests. Joe in Pennsylvania also has no allegiance to either guest. Go ahead.
I've read Mr. Phelps' work, and it has woken me up to the Vatican's involvement in the NWO. And I haven't read Michael's work, but I've listened to his show, and that woke me up to the Zionist involvement in the NWO. And really, I'm starting to think maybe Eric's right about the Jesuits and Michael about the Zionists, because these people, you can't look at them as religious people either. Most people think they're just power-hungry scum that are controlling everything, the Zionists or the Jesuits if they're in control. And, also, I want to mention the Israel's attack on the USS Liberty happened, and so did the Vatican bank scandal. And Benjamin Friedman, I believe that's his name, right, Michael?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yes. He talked out about Zionism and knew a lot, and so did Malachi Martin. He knew about the Vatican. So maybe it's a thing of sort of both sides are working to create a new world order. Same goal.
I'd like to comment specifically about Malachi Martin. If you do some research on the Internet, just go to Google. You can find some brilliant exposés of Malachi Martin. Although he was a priest in the Vatican in the early 1960s, he has been proven beyond any question to have been a Zionist agent working on behalf of New York Jewish interests to change the Vatican policies that led to what we call Vatican II, where the Catholic Church took some revolutionary positions that have left a lot of traditional Catholics somewhat disgruntled, and that's putting it lightly. So don't rely upon Malachi Martin as a reliable source, because he is not. He was actually a traitor to the traditional Catholic Church working on behalf of Zionist interests.
And this is my point. The Jesuits are the ultimate Zionists. Cardinal Bia was another one. In fact, Cardinal Bia was the moving Jesuit behind Vatican II, and the ADL gives an award called the Interfaith Award, and it's called the Cardinal Bia Interfaith Award. The ADL names their award after this most powerful Bavarian Jesuit, who later in the life of Pius XII was his confessor.
Well, Eric, that doesn't prove that the Jesuits are behind Zionism. All it proves is that a Jesuit allowed himself to be a tool of the Zionists. You see, that's where your whole foundation of your whole thesis starts to crumble.
Who was here first, the Jesuit order or the Zionists?
Well, he was a member of the Jesuits, but then he was corrupted by the Zionists. I think that's pretty evident.
No, there's no Zionist movement that predates the establishment of the Jesuit order.
Well, but Cardinal Bia only lived probably from about 1900 to about 1965 or 1970.
Something like that.
Yeah. So you see, this is the whole thing. We find that the traditional elements of the Catholic Church have stood in opposition to Zionism, but in the early 1960s, the Zionists began to move into the Catholic Church and corrupt its policies. But the way you would have us believe, Eric, the Zionists have been running the Catholic Church since the beginning.
The Jesuits.
Well, the Jesuits.
The Jesuits have run the Catholic Church no later than 1814. That's correct. And that there were no Zionists in 1814.
Let me.
Oh, no. On the contrary to that, the whole Zionist philosophy goes back 1,000 years or more.
That's different. Zionism is Luciferianism based on high-level Freemasonry, which the Jesuits revived in 1717 and wrote all the Scottish rites.
Okay, so the Jesuits are satanic, and they created Zionism as their movement to take over the world on behalf of Satan.
To take over Jerusalem, to take over the temple site so they can rebuild the third temple and have the Antichrist be worshipped there, which will be the final pope, and have a world government for 42 months.
Okay, let me get to Matt in Michigan. You're on the Investigative Journal.
Hi, can you hear me?
Oh, I can, Matt. How are you today?
Great. I wanted to echo Michael Collins Piper in that last comment. See, I am a traditional Catholic against Vatican II, and what I want to say is that what most people think is the Catholic Church actually is not. In fact, there was an infiltration of the hierarchy under Pius XII and is now under the control of the Zionists, but in a spiritual sense. So that's where the power of the Vatican is. It's in a spiritual sense, and I do think that people are being led to this one world unified religion with ecumenism, but it will be the Zionist religion under Antichrist.
Okay, any comments on that, guys?
I'd let Eric comment. Go ahead.
I would say, again, that the Jesuits were behind Vatican II. They were whitewashing the Vatican's bloody hands during the Second World War when it was behind the Eurasian Holocaust, not only of Jews, but the Orthodox peoples and the Protestant Prussian peoples and the Catholic Bavarian peoples who refused to accept the infallibility of the Pope of 1870. And in this whitewash, they tried to appear to be nice. They called them the heretic Protestants, now separated brethren. They removed the term perfidious Jews from their prayers, and they appeared to be more gracious. But at the bottom of it is it's still an attempt to have one world government under the final Pope ruling the world from Jerusalem.
Well, Eric, who was responsible for the murder of all the Catholic nuns and priests in Republican Spain? Are you saying the Jesuits were responsible? A lot of people would say it was the communists.
Yeah, well, that's the Republicans in Spain expelled the Jesuits in 1832.
Well, we're not talking about 1832. We're talking about
1932. Pardon me. Excuse me.
Okay, we're talking.
And so the Jesuits had a real enemy there.
So the Jesuits were expelled, and the Republicans then killed all the Catholic priests and nuns, even though they had expelled the Jesuits. See, that's illogical.
Okay, but there was a real enemy at that time. The Jesuits had been expelled. They did kill those priests and nuns, even as was done in Spain or in France during the Napoleonic War.
The Jesuits who had been expelled were responsible for killing the other priests and nuns.
No,
that doesn't make sense.
The Republicans were responsible for that.
The Republicans were
let's take a break, you guys.
But they were anti-Jesuit.
Okay, we're going to have to take a break. Come back for our last segment on the Investigative Journal. Okay, let's pretend for one moment here that I'm a football coach, and let me pretend that Michael and Eric are on my team. And let me remind my players one thing, guys. We're in the fourth quarter here, and we're down by a lot of points. As I look at it, we don't have a chance to win this game. And if you two want to play on my team, we're going to have to take your books, put them together, and work together to have a plan to defeat the people that are now winning. Somehow they've done it. Somehow they did it to us. Now, Michael, you're thinking it's the Zionists. Eric, you're thinking it's the Jesuits. I'm going to ask you both, so we can beat these guys, to somehow work together as a team, because I know we're on the same side, and I want to win this game. Because, a lot of people, this whole country is in balance here, and we're talking about a subject that no one else talks about. And so I'm going to ask you that, and hopefully we can beat these guys, whoever they may be. Let me get to my caller, Daryl in Pennsylvania. You're on the Investigative Journal.
Yeah, hello. And I just, as a 26-year veteran of the intelligence community, something really bothers me, and that is that we have so many 33-degree Masons and the Papal Knights of Malta being in charge or being assistant directors of such as the FBI and the CIA. 5 CIA chiefs were all Knights of Malta: William Donovan, John McCone, William Casey, William Colby, and George Tenet. And Michael made the comment, well, if someone's from a Rotary Club or something, that's no big deal. But these guys aren't from Rotary Clubs. They're from organizations whose loyalty is not to the American Constitution and the American people. And so my question to both of you would be, to both of the guests, is should anybody have dual loyalties? I don't want Zionist Israel Americans holding any top key positions, but I also don't want any high-level Freemasons and Papal Knights of Malta being all over the intelligence community and the fingers of power in America whose loyalty is not to the U.S. Constitution and the American people. What do you folks think of that?
Okay, go ahead, Michael.
Hear me? I'm having the phone. Can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead.
Okay, yeah.
We have about 2 minutes, so leave a minute for Michael. You know the game plan.
Oh, this is Mike. You mean Eric?
Yeah, Eric,
okay, no, I agree 100%. I don't think there should be dual loyalty. I've never seen it convincingly proven to me, though, that members of the Knights of Malta are dual loyalists. I know William Colby, who was murdered a few years ago. Since you're in the intelligence community, you know full well that the word in the intelligence community is that he was murdered by the Zionists. And, in fact, a very good friend of mine had just set Bill Colby up at a meeting at the Watergate Hotel to begin working for Arab interests against the Zionists, and he was murdered for that. And so I say the Zionists are the real power. The Jesuits have very little power.
Okay, go ahead, Eric. Final minute.
I would say as long as the Pope claims to have universal temporal power over all the nations, and that he is ultimately the one behind all high-level Freemasonry, which includes the Zionists, that we cannot have a true Republican free government at this time until they're dealt with.
Okay, that's going to conclude. We're all out of time. I want to thank again my two guests, Michael Collins Piper and Eric John Phelps, for being on the show. Apologize to a whole bunch of callers I didn't get to, but we will hopefully do it again. And until then, until tomorrow at 1 p.m. Central, good afternoon.
I'm going to comment on Mr. Eric John Phelps. As you know, I recently debated him on Greg Szymanski's program here on RBN, and I have to say I was very delighted by the reviews of the debate that I have seen. I have to say the ones that I've seen anyway, the ones that have been sent to me, have all been pretty favorable, and they basically said that I won hands down. Now, you know, be that as it may, as I said, the only reason I accepted the challenge to a debate was because if I didn't accept the challenge, then I would have been accused of being afraid to debate. Well, as you know, Mr. Phelps thinks that the Jesuits were behind the sinking of the Titanic. He thinks the Jesuits control the U.S. Federal Reserve System, that the Jesuits were behind the assassination of John F. Kennedy, the first Roman Catholic president in America. He thinks a lot of things. He thinks the Jesuits were behind the attack on the World Trade Center. He thinks that Israel's Mossad is an arm of the Jesuits. Okay, this is what he thinks. This is what he says in his book, Vatican Assassins. Well, I accepted the challenge to debate on the question, really specifically of the so-called Jesuit orchestration of the John F. Kennedy assassination. Well, needless to say, that was the debate. But Mr. Phelps is apparently rather stung by the widespread perception that yours truly won that debate. And he's issued a very interesting letter that I really just have to... I almost hate to waste the time doing it, but I only do this because I know that there are people out there who take Mr. Phelps very seriously. They consider him a very reliable source. They believe that he's doing good for America by his research, and here's what he says. This is Mr. Phelps. Dear brethren and friends, In reflecting on the debate between Mr. Piper and myself a little over a week ago with Greg Szymanski acting as a referee, I must make the following statements. Number one, Greg Szymanski did a good job in attempting to keep us to the question presented. However, that job is generally not easy. I have no criticism of Greg's oversight. Number two, I ceded Mr. Piper his point that the Mossad was involved in the JFK assassination after spending a week reading his book, Final Judgment. I confessed my error in believing that JFK was on good terms with Israel at the time of his assassination. An error I learned from the Jesuit-trained Irish Roman Catholic pro-labor Zionist John Loftus in his book, The Secret War Against the Jews. Number three, he says, Mr. Phelps again, Mr. Piper, however, did not keep to the question presented and attacked me personally, suggesting that I was an agent of the order, which Greg then questioned him further. This was an ad hominem attack, and as such was a point for me. No, it was not. Now this is me commenting, ladies and gentlemen. I did not make an ad hominem attack on Mr. Phelps. What I said was that Mr. Phelps' book was so rife with easily refutable errors that someone could believe, although I said that I did not believe it myself, I said that someone could believe that the book was, in fact, put up by the Jesuits to disprove that they were involved in the Kennedy assassination, because the book making the thesis is so rife with errors that it is easily refutable. So, you know, facts are facts, ladies and gentlemen. If the book is rife with errors that I could spot, then you know, the point is this, then the book falls. Then the book falls on that alone, because if there's so many errors in a particular area of which I am familiar with, then how many other errors are there in areas that I am not familiar with? Mr. Phelps continues. He says, Mr. Piper said my book was full of mistakes and was not even to be considered as true by any serious researcher. This is a blanket statement and was totally off point. Another ad hominem attack. No, it was not totally off point, ladies and gentlemen, and it was not an ad hominem attack. It was an absolute determination by me that these errors were so rife and so dangerous that it just destroys the book. He says, Mr. Piper declared that the Jesuits were not at all a serious player in the quest for a new world order, but rather the Zionists, one of them being Jesuit Malachi Martin, as he declared, are the true masters. He says, this, in light of my book and accompanying CD, is a blatant refusal to consider the history of the bloody Jesuit order, expelled by every Roman Catholic country in Europe except Belgium in the 19th century. Well, what I didn't say that the Jesuits are not involved in any intrigue. I said that in comparison to the Zionists, they pale in comparison. But in any case, he says, Mr. Piper replied that the sovereign military order of Malta would be no more powerful than a local men's Rotary Club. This also exhibits a blatant refusal to consider the political history of the Knights of Malta, including men like the German Nazi Franz von Papen, who brought Hitler to power, and pro-Nazi Joseph Kennedy, who brought FDR to power. Well, I did not say that the Order of Malta was no more powerful than the local men's Rotary Club. I simply made reference to the Rotary Club in the sense that there are people who are members of the Rotary Club, and they're also maybe members of the Knights of Malta and so forth. So again, Mr. Phelps is twisting things here. Folks, we have a break coming up, and I have to continue this, and we have quite a few callers lined up. Stay tuned, please. This is Michael Collins Piper coming to you from Washington. Ladies and gentlemen, Michael Collins Piper coming back to you, I should say, from right here in Washington, D.C. I was responding to, I almost feel like I'm wasting your time and mine, but I think it's important, as I say, because of this email that was sent out by Eric John Phelps, who does have a certain following in this country in the Patriot movement. Anyway, I was continuing, and I'm almost finished here with it. He said, Mr. Phelps in his letter says, Mr. Piper is quite a reader of the Jesuit-authored Vatican House organ, La Civiltà Cattolica. He quotes it all the time in previous writings. Why read Jesuit rhetoric, he asks, when the society has no power? Well, first of all, Mr. Piper doesn't read Italian. La Civiltà Cattolica is published in Italian, ladies and gentlemen. I have never seen that magazine or newspaper. I don't even know if it's a newspaper or a magazine. I've never seen a copy of it, to the best of my knowledge, in my life. The only thing I know about it is I quoted it one time in a newspaper article and then repeated that quotation in my book, The High Priests of War. One quotation on one topic from that Jesuit magazine or newspaper, and yet Mr. Phelps says I quote it all the time in previous writings. He says, why read Jesuit rhetoric when the society has no power? I never said the Jesuits don't have any power, folks, so why is he suggesting that? You know, this is the kind of stuff we're talking about here. Okay. He concludes. He says, in conclusion, Mr. Piper attacks me personally and covered for the order, which he claims is benign today. He violated the rules of engagement as laid down by the host and proceeded to promote an agenda that, to my benefit, created serious doubts in the minds of neutral listeners concerning his honesty and thus credibility. It says, therefore, I am adding the brilliant but dishonest Michael Collins Piper to my list of Jesuit temporal coadjutors. Coadjutors, big word there. I never heard it in my life. He is a bold-faced liar, and from now on I will refer to him as such without reservation or remorse. Sincerely in faith, Brother Eric. Okay, ladies and gentlemen. Okay. Yes, I admit it. The Jesuits killed John F. Kennedy. The Jesuits control the Federal Reserve. The Jesuits control Hollywood. Folks. Folks, I beg your forgiveness if I bored you with Mr. Phelps' letter, but I thought, again, it was very instructive because, there are a lot of people purveying stories and information out here, and a lot of it is just not true. And when I can point out something that's not true, and I know it to not be true, and I can point out errors, I intend to do it. That was the purpose of that debate, and certainly Greg Szymanski handled it very well. I actually found myself getting a little impatient with Mr. Phelps because I felt that he was going off topic, and frankly, a lot of people said he sounded rather confused by the time it was all over. So, ideally, I'm never going to bring this subject up again. It is really a horrible waste of time, but needless to say, something had to be said, and it's been said.